and welcome you, Gayl, to unmute yourself and to share with us conversations about working together as partners with our allies in administration. So take it away, Gayl.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me back another time to OTAP. I love doing work with this group and these folks, and some of you are familiar, and some of you I'm just getting to know. But um, I want to say that much of the learning that I have done, much of the professional learning that I have done about making administrators into allies has been gleaned from work that we got to do in Oregon. We worked in local, as a OTAP coordinator, I worked in local school districts, I worked with ESDs, I worked with the State Department of Education. And so, at some point I realized that we weren't tapping into the the resources that we could have tapped into with our administrators. And the story about that is they changed the certification rules in Oregon, and I was required as a part of that change to get a superintendent's license, an administrator's license, and then a superintendent's license if I was going to keep the job I already had. It was, I was supervising people, and they changed the rules so that I had to have that license. Well, I wasn't real happy about that because it really was about 3 years of uh, college coursework and um, a lot of stuff that really didn't apply to me. But what I did was I took it and I said, okay, what can I find out about administrators and assistive technology? How can I find out more about the roles of administrators and assistive technology? So, what you're going to see today began in those days when I was going to Portland State University to get my administrator's license. But it has grown and changed over time, and many people have been excited and interested in the content. What I hope we can do today, we've got a great group. What I hope we can do today is have some discussion, either in the chat, or I love it when people unmute themselves and talk to me directly, but about how you see your need in your agency for um, actions that would make your administrators allies, actions that they could do to help you in your program. I'm curious how many of you are actually assistive technology specialists. How many of you work directly in the area of assistive technology? So type yes in the chat if you are a person who mostly works with assistive technology, or no if you're somebody else. Yes. Betty says no. Lori says no. Annie says no. Okay. So for those who transition, Betty, what's your primary uh, role?
I work at District Office Ventosa, and I'm a proponent of trying to get our district back into having assistive technology support. Now we had a team when I first started with the district, and it disbanded because people retired, moved on to other districts, and we just haven't been able to get back. And I feel it's an area we really are weak in.
Okay. And I see Tara said, I work with assistive technology, providing training and referring. but I am not a designated AT specialist. I will tell you that that's a very common situation these days. We're seeing, there was a time when we thought everybody was going to have an assistive technology specialist, and we'll take a look at that idea today as we move forward in our conversations. Tim, you said no. What's your role?
I'm a occupational therapy assistant. I
Okay.
do use a lot of technology for the classrooms I serve, but I'm not an AT specialist.
Okay.
We do have one, well, actually two right now, but one of them is going to be leaving. So,
Okay, great. Well, that gives me a better idea of who you are. And again, I'm hoping that you will uh, have a conversation with me, because that's really the best way for us to think about administrators as our allies, or how do we develop them into allies. One of the things that I run into all the time is that people say to me, "Well, we can't ask our administrators to do anything um, because they're really busy and they've got, right now it's a really busy time. They've got budgeting issues, they've got layoffs, they've got planning for next year. There's all sorts and kinds of things that pull on a school administrator." And whether you're talking about a principal in a building you work in, or the director of special ed in your agency, or even somebody um, higher up, if you have a big agency and you may have, different sections of your service model. What we're going to talk about primarily today is the administrators who are most directly above you, most directly in charge of the work that you do, and most directly able to contribute to that work. So that's our goal. In this session, we'll explore strategies for developing a effective and high quality working relationship with those people who are most directly in support of your program and the work that you do. Now, if you're not an AT specialist and you're not doing administrator assistive technology work, think about this in terms of what you personally might need from a school administrator in order to reach some of the goals that you are thinking about. So I have to let you know that work that started when I was in school administrator school at the university turned into, over time, a book called Leading the Way to Excellence in AT Services. I wrote it with my friend Penny Reed, and we do get royalties from this book. Last check I got was $97. So, and it's quarterly. So I'm not getting rich off of it, but I love it that it's distributed enough. It's distributed by Cass Publishing, and I love it that it's distributed enough to even send me a royalty check. I want to know, for our conversations today, what is your definition? What is your description of excellence? And I got us started here with some responses from related service providers who have taken this workshop. They said positive outcomes and what we do works, ownership from the entire team. I can imagine that many of you who work in the area of AT are also saying, well, those things apply to me too. If you're working in AT, you may be thinking about how do we develop AT awareness at the district level? How do we develop equal access to AT or even equal access to curriculum for all students? So I wondered if you've thought about that at all, and if you have, what are your thoughts about what is excellence in your program? What would make it an excellent program, or if nothing else, a really good program? Again, I want to invite you to unmute yourself or talk in the chat. Okay, Michelle says evidence of AAC being used with fidelity across the school day and throughout the school environment, staff implementing strategies and tools. Students have what they need to access the environment and curriculum to make progress toward their goals. That's 3 really good ones. Anybody got another one? Oh, 2 more. An understanding that AT implementation is the job of the whole team. Oh my goodness, Carolyn, we could talk about that for entire days. Access to AAC resources, including color printing. So we don't have all the things that we need. And that's one way that we might develop our programs and develop excellence in our programs. Okay, thank you for all those. I'm happy. I want to look back. Oh, there's another one. IEP teams are aware of what AT should be shared at meetings to support enhanced student learning. Betty, can you talk to me a little bit more about that, either in the chat or unmute yourself?
Yeah, a lot of our teams have no idea what they should even be talking about in an IEP team as to what could be put into the special factors, assistive technology that will support learning. I mean, yes, it needs to be required, but also just sharing what would enhance that student's learning. Even if you don't put it in the box, let's have a discussion. So many meetings I'm at, it's just like, nope, they don't have to have it. And they move on, as opposed to helping the teacher who's at that meeting understand ways that could help this student access their curriculum easier.
Okay. Actually, that leads us to the next question I wanted to ask, which is, what are your current greatest challenges? People have, when I've asked this question to other groups, people have said things like having to retrofit everything. They buy stuff that isn't accessible, and we have to go in and somehow make it accessible for our kids. Low expectations on the part of administrators. And I want to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but the lack of general knowledge, which is, I think, what Betty was getting at. But for you in your program, what's your greatest challenge? What's the thing you'd really like to be working toward? We're finishing a school year and starting a new school year, and I've always loved the fact that every year is some kind of a new beginning for educators. So, what kinds of things might you already be thinking about for next year? But what are your greatest challenges? And I think the question is, do you have any faith that you'll be able to address them? Greatest challenge, adequate time to train in a large district. Okay, Michelle, there's one that I hear a whole lot. Carolyn says there are so many, but a general lack of knowledge of AT. Most of the referrals to our team come during IEP meetings from parents and advocates. Teams rarely preemptively consider AT before IEP meetings. Michelle says, yes, always have faith. Okay, well, you're seeing a few ideas about what people's greatest challenges are. I want to invite you to think about your own. You don't have to type it in the chat or unmute yourself, although I love it when people do that. But what I want to call your attention to is we have the slide deck handout for today, but we also have this handout. It's called Administrators as Allies. And on the front page of this document is the title is Administrators as Allies, a planning document. And what it asks you to do first is to consider and write down the service improvement goal that you have. We can't address every issue at the same time. And if we do, we just overwhelm people. So what's the thing that is your greatest challenge? We talked about that a little bit before. And how would you like to improve your services in that area? I'm going to invite you to write it down, and also the intended student outcomes. So if you improve that thing in the work that you do, what will be the outcomes for students? And that's sometimes a harder question to answer, especially if you're working as a consultant or a related service provider and you're not in a classroom all the time. But I think you'll have a good idea about what outcomes you want to see for your students as you move forward in this goal planning. The other thing on this worksheet that I want to call your attention to is the bottom box on this worksheet is evidence of success. What will it take? What will success look like? So if I go back to the chat, we had some really good ones. Somebody said there's a general lack of knowledge about AT. Most of the referrals to our team come during IEP meetings from parents and advocates. So there's actually two goals that I can imagine in that contribution that came from Carolyn. One is we might want to increase the general knowledge of AT so that IEP teams are more independent and more capable of making assistive technologies decisions. But we also might want to think about a goal that says, what do we do when a referral pops up inside an IEP meeting and nobody's considered it or done anything about it? And I'm working with several districts right now who are trying to find solutions to that so that they can clearly define what the IEP team needs to do before they send a referral to an AT team or to any kind of a specialist. So the last thing here is teams rarely preemptively consider AT before IEP meetings. How could we change that, and what data could you provide that would let you know that that was true? Antoinette says her greatest challenge, her goal would be school teams using devices daily. Is it, Antoinette, I'm assuming, are you meaning AAC devices? Or are you talking about general assistive technology? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and go on it. I'm curious, but that doesn't actually apply to what we're doing here. What we're gonna do in this workshop is look at the other side of that, of the handout that you have, the Administrators as Allies planning document. And we're going to think of 4 categories where administrators might be able to help us as we move forward in reaching the goals that we set. So the first thing, of course, is going to be to share those goals with an administrator. But let's go on, and I want to give you a little bit more background about the work that I learned about as I did the administrator's certification in Oregon. This is a study that I learned about that's by Leithwood, Harris, and Hopkins, and it's a meta study. So that means they looked at all sorts and kinds of research about what the high quality administrators do, high quality leaders do, and they developed from several hundred research studies these 4 categories. I have found these 4 categories very useful in thinking about working with administrators and actually in being a consultant to district administrators when I get the opportunity to do that. So the 4 categories are building a vision and setting directions. I think that's fairly self-explanatory, and we'll go over it more in just a minute. The second one is managing the program. And in this definition, management means like the day-to-day daily activities that need to be completed in order for the program to run. So for many administrators, one of those things is making sure the school buses get to the right house at the right time with the right kind of bus. That's one management activity. But when you get into either your assistive technology programs, or for those of you who are looking at different kinds of programs, equipment is one that falls here, both in the budgeting aspect of equipment and then in some other aspects that we'll talk about it again in a minute. The third aspect of leadership that Leithwood, Harris, and Hopkins discovered as they did their meta study was understanding and developing individuals. So that's the professional learning, the professional development that we do. But it's not the only thing that we do. And it's probably the one where we need a lot of help from administrators. I remember seeing in the chat somebody saying they couldn't get enough time to do professional development. So we need some help from administrators, but we also can be a little more creative about what we do and help to develop individuals. The final one is redesigning the organization. That is program evaluation and improvement activities. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about leadership and the impacts on excellence. So if you know who the AT leaders are in your agency, and I'm assuming all of you who are working in AT are one of them, or if your goal is a different area, not assistive technology, that you are one of the leaders in the area that you have concerns about. But one of the things that we can do is know who those leaders are, because sometimes they're spread all over the place. And we can work with them directly to develop, maintain, and improve AT services. To talk about what AT services need improvement, things like that. Are working in concert with our administrators, we can help staff, students, and families develop a vision of AT use and communicate it widely. We saw in the chat at least one example of how we really need to be able to collaborate more with all the players so that we don't have to do every bit of the work. Administrators can support staff in using AT to improve the education of students with disabilities, and they can do that in collaboration with you. You are the first person that they might be supporting. So we can develop a culture where AT is valued and used, and that could be its own activity. If what you want is awareness about assistive technology and how it's used throughout your building or your agency, developing a culture where AT is used and valued can be its own work and its own activity. And then finally, one of the things that we're finding in doing this work is that administrators sit at tables that we don't get to sit at. We don't get to be at the principal's meeting. We don't get to be at the curriculum, the director's meeting for all the different departments in the agency. So one of the things that we can do that will help them facilitate collaboration between departments is to let them know what we're needing and what we're looking at, and maybe even give them some look-fors, is what they call it in the administrator's world. Gives them some things to look for as they sit in some of those meetings. For instance, right now, this time of year, many departments have a budget that has just a little bit left in it. And they can't carry it over because of the biennium. So there may be extra resources available that have to be spent quickly. If you're a person who needs equipment or needs tangible items, this is a really good time to make sure that your administrator knows what those things are and can say to somebody else, well, if you need to spend that money, I've got a way to spend it. They'll have to make sure that there's a good connection between the budget and the money to be spent. But I know many of you have been told, it's time to stop doing purchase orders. It's time to stop your spending activities for the year. It's actually a little late to go in and say to administrators, here's some things that we could use if you run across extra money, but it's never a bad time to do it, because there could always be extra funds. Another thing about being an administrator, there are some individuals who are leaders because of the assigned administrative position they fill. We've been talking mostly about them. There are other individuals who may become leaders in changing either AT services or whatever services you provide, because their knowledge of devices and services or the way others in the group respond to them. If you're a passionate person about a particular area, a particular subject, you can be a leader and bring others along with you. So we need both assigned leaders and in this case, we're going to talk about them as AT leaders, but we need assigned leaders and natural leaders who can help us to develop the changes we want to know. And there's a great deal of information in this book, North House. He labels them assigned leaders and emergent leaders. So emergent leaders is probably a term that we could use with this group because many of you are not assistive technology specialists. So one of the activities that I do with people in setting a vision, remember that first activity in the list of things that administrators do was setting a vision and having a leadership role. So I want to walk you through a quick math problem. I know we math at 2:30 in the afternoon is a hard road to go, but I'm not going to make you do too much math, except that it can help you develop a realistic vision for your program. So the first question we have is, what population of students are you expecting to serve? Are you expecting to serve only students who have IEPs? Are you expecting to serve only students who are in transition? Are you expecting to serve only students who have orthopedic impairments? I heard lots of different responses in terms of your roles in the chat, but just in your own head or on on a scrap piece of paper on your desk or something, the question is, what population of students are you expecting to serve? Now, we're going to use an assistive technologies example because I'm doing this workshop for OTAP, but you can translate this this information to your own setting, I think, relatively easy. While you're thinking about what population how you want to define your population of students that you serve, let me tell you a story. And several of you in this group will identify with this story. This is a kindergarten student who was successfully using AAC in her ECSE program. She was able to navigate multiple pages, required few trials to learn new buttons. She had core boards that matched the pages that were provided to the teacher. The kindergarten teacher got core boards that matched all the pages that this child had on her AAC device. And when positioned properly, the specialist asked the teacher to model the word go. That turned out to be a big mistake. The teacher was so unclear or so, I don't know what, about having to figure out how to model the word go, that the AAC and positioning equipment began to disappear. And the teacher stated at the next visit that he would have to be placed in a special ed classroom or have a one-to-one aide. Now, unfortunately, that's kind of a true story. I changed some of the details of it, but it's not one that it's one that's familiar to me, and I'm assuming that it may be a familiar story to you. Part of the problem here is that the teacher and the staff did not have the same vision of what the assistive technology program was supposed to do, what the teacher was supposed to do, what the AAC specialist was supposed to do. And so as more stuff came into her classroom, as she realized that she got all those core boards and wasn't quite sure what to do with them. And when she was asked to actually do something in front of another adult, she freaked out. She really said, I can't do this. So how can we deal with a story like this? How can we address a story like this? And my question for today is, how can our administrators help us as we run across situations like this or similar ones in other schools? So let's do the math. Oh, and too far. I asked you earlier to identify the population of students that you serve in your district. So at this level, we're talking about your program and what population of students does your program serve. So it might be many people who do assistive technology say, well, it's all the kids who have assistive technology. So in this district, no, I'm sorry, have IEPs. In this sample district that we're going to use, 1,050 students in the district have IEPs. But one of the other questions we need to ask is, what percentage of those 1,050 students may need your services? Because not everybody does. Whether you're an assistive technology specialist or an occupational therapist, I remember the days when if a child had a diagnosis of any kind of an orthopedic impairment, we put them on an IEP and called the OT immediately. That was before we got any performance information or anything like that. So one of the things that we need to do these days is to figure out what percentage of our students may need the services that you're providing. I've worked in special schools where the answer is all of them do. All of them need the service that we're providing. It's not uncommon for people to say 50%. 50% of our students need assistive technology. 50% of our students on IEPs need assistive technology. I've also worked in a couple states where they set a target state goal because they were collecting state level data, and they said, we want to get up to 25% of students who have assistive technology on their IEP. So what I want to do is invite you to multiply the number of students that you are intending to serve. In this case, it would be students on IEP, by the percentage of targeted students that you think may need your services. So if it's 50%, the easiest one to do is 50%. So you divide by 2. What I'd like to invite you to do is do that math project and type your answer in the chat. How many I'm sorry. We're going to type our answer in the chat the next time. But I see there's one new message, so. Oh, that's Chandra. Okay. So figure out what percentage of the students that you are your potential client base you actually want to serve. And then here's the one where we're going to do the math. If all specialists in your area have 50 students on their full-time caseload, so this is actually assuming assistive technology, but all specialists in your area have 50 students on their full-time caseload, how many specialists would you need to provide services using an expert one-to-one model? So your target population in this AT example is 10.5. Whoops, not 210.5. I apologize for the typo. That just go to show that doing the math is not always the easiest thing to do. But what I'm hoping that you'll get out of this is I don't know of any district or agency that has a cadre of assistive technology specialists with that number in it. I don't know of any district where they have 10.5 specialists to minimally serve the population. And so my question would be to you, do you believe that you could get to the number for your agency in terms of the number of specialists you would need to do a one-to-one model, to do an expert model? And that's what I'd like you to type in the chat. What's your number? She says, if my math is correct, we would need 144 AT consultants to serve our population. We have 8. So Carolyn, absolutely. That's the most common kind of number that we see. I'm wondering if anybody else, maybe even somebody who's not in assistive technology, might have another number to post in there. All you have to do is post the number, and that would be just great, just to prove that that it works the way we thought it would. And I'm sorry if I confused you with the math problem. That was just math was not my best subject, clearly. Okay, well, I'll watch the chat and see if there's any more contributions to the number of specialists that you would need. But one of the things we have to do if we need 144 specialists or even 10.5 in a district where we only have maybe 1 or 2, is to hold some courageous conversations and healthy debate and to expect that there will be viewpoints, just different viewpoints, and viewpoints discussed about upholding the status quo. It's really hard to make changes in your service model or the way you do things on a one-to-one, particularly on a one-to-one basis, one student at a time. And one of the things that we can do in order to do that is to work with our administrators to develop a realistic vision of what assistive technology looks like. So this is a vision for one student at a time model. Students with disabilities use the AT devices and services they need and show increased benefit from FAPE because of them. So this looks like a really good vision. It looks like one where kids have what they need, the AT they need, or whatever they need. They show increased benefit from getting that stuff and increased benefit of FAPE. So that's a great vision, but it is still a one student at a time model. Here's an agency vision that I worked with a different agency on developing. It's an agency-wide vision. Our services help struggling students to perform better. Our services fit into overall school improvement goals. And we want to define what is each provider's role in achieving this vision. Now, this is an agency that's worked long and hard on figuring out how they can move away from a one student at a time model in their services, but not take anything away from the services provided to the students. So this is the kind of activity that we want to see in our vision setting, so that it takes a bigger view rather than a one student at a time view. Here's a list of things that we might do. We might ask administrators to do. We might, in a leadership capacity, we might ask them to assess the AT roles and review results. We might make a list of questions for them about AT use in the building or the program and see if they are able to answer those questions or if they can help you answer those questions. We might identify opportunities where advocating for AT use could be appropriate and effective. One of my favorite things to do with school principals is to send them on a regular basis, but at least twice a year and 3 times a year if I can manage it, a list of all the students in their school who use assistive technology, what they use it for, and then a short description of what the administrator could look for if they go into that student's classroom during a time when they're using assistive technology. Our administrators do not know what we're doing. And that is part of the problem, both in assistive technology and in many other areas of the work that we do. They're busy. We know they're busy, and we say we don't want to bother them. But if we don't give them information, then they are not able to advocate for us. Things that we can do, we can report regularly to our administrators about the service model and its provision. We can collect and share data about the AT activities of staff. I used to work with a program where every year they went to their administrator and they said, we need at least one more AT specialist, and we'd be better if we had two AT specialists. And he would say to them every year, what would those people do? And they were unable to define and describe how having more people would help them to develop a better program. And basically, they were wanting people to just take more of the load. If you saw that do the math program, and the slides that we did there, if you need 144 AT specialists, going to your administrator every year and saying, well, I need 5 or 10 more AT specialists is not going to be a very popular activity. And know that those administrators are being pulled at from multiple directions. But you can develop goals and activities with your administrator to describe how you can support each other in leading AT services, and you can share information and suggest outreach activities that may encourage collaboration with other parts of the agency. So this is a time when I would like to invite you to, I'm going to take just 2 or 3 minutes and ask the question, what leadership do you need from your administrator? And I see that font's too big, but what leadership do you need from your administrator? In what areas would you like them to be involved, not on a day-to-day basis, but in supporting you in developing either a vision for your AT program or a plan for a part of your AT program or your part of your program that may be in need of change? Okay. We've had a little bit of time to get started. Hopefully you've dropped some notes into this section of the worksheet or just on a piece of paper if you haven't been able to get to the worksheet. I'm curious if you would be willing to type in the chat what kind of vision setting and leadership activities you think of when we talk about this category of what school administrators can do to be our allies. So please go ahead and type in the chat about what you're thinking about. And then we'll move on to the other 3 areas of how school administrators can support and help us. So in the chat, supporting staff in reaching out to the ESD to get the AT referral help they need. It seems there is a cost deterrent, acknowledging the OT as a point person for AT needs to be when no one is assigned. So what you're describing, I think, is even a bigger thing, which is the development of a service model where you can get your local district services and know when to apply to the ESD for a referral for help if they need it. So that's a great thought about how administrators can help with leadership. And there may be the ability to have a conversation with your administrator or with other leaders, or to even bring all the parties involved together to have a conversation about how we can, when do we reach out to the ESD and how can we get those referrals completed? Tim says we want them to hear our needs and ask as best they can. Keith says your idea of educating administrators on what we actually do in the role of AT in our students' success is such a good idea. I think many of my administrators would be happy to advocate for more AT use. They just don't know what they don't know. You know, one of the quotes I have from an administrator that I worked with as I was developing the Leading the Way to Excellence book was an administrator who said, well, I don't do anything with assistive technology because I have really good assistive technology specialists and I don't need to interfere with their work. So he saw the opportunity, any opportunity to talk with those assistive technology specialists as interfering with their work. I think as we begin this journey, we have to develop allies. We have to think about how our administrators can be allies. And one of the things that we really can do is, as you said, let them know what they don't know. Have them just even give them a short overview of what you do as a program. Now, you will not get more than 10 or 15 minutes with administrator once a month. So make sure that the stuff that you're sharing with them comes in multiple formats so that they can see it as they meet with you, or see it in an email, or see it in a short video. We did the session on differentiating professional learning last time, and this is a time when we really need to differentiate for the time and energy that administrators may or may have. Keith says once they know, many of them could be another strong advocate with the support of the school. I'm sorry, there it is. With this, within the school that I can't quite support as an ESD employee. Right. And one of the, if you're having trouble between the district and the ESD, one of the things that I think is really important is to have that school administrator on board who knows when it is appropriate to refer to the AT program at the EST, and when you can ask your staff to do whatever they do. And that's part of setting your vision. That's part of leadership and vision setting, is knowing what do we do with the ESD, and what do we ask the ESD to do that we can't do on our own. So that's a really, I think, important set of questions to ask at some point. Let's go on to talking about management, or we're going to run out of time. So here we go, management. You can see, I love this graphic because it really describes management. It's everything from school buses to school schedules, all sorts and kinds of things. But the services that you provide as related service providers fall into this category. So management is identifying internal processes and operating guidelines that apply to your program. Ensure that that your services are legal, efficient, equitable, and cost-effective. Ensure that the appropriate employees know how to respond to a parent's request for AT. Require that staff use data to make AT decisions. Make funds, human resources, and planning time available for AT services. I want to highlight this one about require that staff use data to make AT decisions. I worked with a director of special ed in a very small school district for a while, and I was their assistive technology specialist, but I did it virtually because I couldn't actually drive that far to the district to see individual kids. So the one-to-one model wasn't going to work for me. They had a student who was unlike any other student in their school, and she was in her teens, but really functioning at a 10 months level. She was functioning at a very low level in many areas. The staff sent a purchase order to the director of special ed, and he called me up and he said, "I don't know about this purchase order. I don't know what to do with it." And it was all kinds of toys and switches from enabling devices, including that bear that taps its symbols and stuff like that. And what I said to the director was, you need to make sure that they're using those switches for more age-appropriate activities. And I said, just ask them. what could they do to do more age-appropriate activities with the switches? The administrator said that to the staff. He didn't hear that from them for a long time. They finally submitted the exact same order for purchase that they had submitted before with the bears and the symbols, and he funded it. He went ahead and ordered all the stuff they'd asked for. And then he called me up and he said, I think I made a mistake. And he told me what had happened. And I said, yeah, I think you made a mistake too. And this idea of using that staff have to use some data and some information to make AT decisions is one that really fell apart there in this particular situation. One of the other things that our administrators can do is help you develop management and operating guidelines. You know, I used to think these were big, fancy booklets that people would read. And what we've discovered over time is that people who really need to be able to read these kinds of pieces of information are people who don't have a lot of time to delve into the services that we provide. So we want answers to questions about things like referral and assessment, about consideration and the service need or documentation. But one of the things that I think we do in a management activity is to define those things and make sure that everybody has the information in order to do their part in that thing. But it'll be different for every district. It'll be customized for every agency because that's just how agencies are. Administrators can help you develop and review processes and operating guidelines for AT services. They can allocate physical, personnel, time, and monetary resources. They get to handle the budget and the resource development. So they can say, yes, you can have 3 weeks this summer to work on the program that you want to develop. And here's what I want to see when it's over, or when your 3 weeks are over. They can ensure accountability by working with the ATU leaders to use cost-effective acquisition strategies like bulk licenses and things like that. And opportunities, identify opportunities that they have to advocate for AT, both within the district and between agencies. AT leaders, people like those of us who aren't administrators, can gather and maintain data, maintain a list of activities, and a list of AT devices that are needed so that when it's that time of year and you're able to hand the administrator says, okay, we got $10,000 to spend. How can you spend it? You're ready with that list of things, and you can tag the ones that add up to $10,000. I think establishing a system for tracking your equipment, research and organized volume licensing, those are more, again, efficiency strategies. So I will invite you to think for just a minute about what are the management's help, what help in the area of management would you need from your administrator? So that's the physical stuff, the budgeting, the time spent on professional learning, time spent on your work in professional learning. What are the kinds of things that you would want your administrator to help you with? How could you develop them as allies in this area of management? Okay, I'm going to move forward to the next area of supervision. You all have been so lovely as interactive audience that we're going to wait for future comments and questions to the end. The third area that our school administrators can help us with is supervision. And one of the things that I think is important to think about is that we are the peers of most of the people that we work with, whether we're related service providers or AT specialists or AAC specialists. We are working with our peers. So there has to be somebody at the next level up who can help us with supervision. And I love, again, this graphic because it lists training, motivation, advice, success, direction. There are many ways that an administrator can do supervision that helps us. One of the things that we need to do always is to assess staff in their knowledge of the stuff that we're training them on. What do they already know? Do they really need this training? We can recruit people with the skills we need. When we're doing job interviews, it's really one of the things I do in any job interview I'm ever involved in is to say, how do you use technology in your practice? And it's so fascinating to find out what people say about that. We can assure that all staff have the basic needed understanding of the of the AT that they need to know or the service that we're providing. We can demonstrate an interest in making AT usable and ensure that all who serve the child implement the IEP. So one of the things, that's a supervisory activity that really goes into what is on the IEP and is it actually being provided? I think everybody should know these things when we're talking about supervision. They should know the definition of AT devices and services and the school district's responsibility under the law. They should know factors that indicate a student might need AT and how to participate effectively in AT consideration. And again, that's going to be customized for your agency. So I'm happy to talk with any individual who wants to talk about that. But those are the kinds of things that people need to know. One of the things that we do know is that without coaching and mentoring, the amount of the amount of information that people get when they get training is sometimes is maintained, that's this yellow bar, but it's not actually usable until somebody gets coaching and mentoring. So that's a supervision activity in terms of how do we provide that coaching and mentoring in order to monitor staff performance in relation to AT. And I'm going to let you go through this list later. And know that as a AT leader, you can alert your administrator to opportunities to celebrate the successes of children, provide information about needed AT skills, do all of these kinds of things in order to help them be better supervisors. So this is a focus on the people and the people that need information. And so that's one aspect of supervision. Again, I'm going to ask you to think about we're running out of time here, so I'm going to ask you to think about that supervision uh, section of the worksheet. In addition to time for professional learning, how can you work together in the area of supervision? And then the final area that school administrators are involved in is advocacy and program improvement. From improvement science, the area of improvement science, we know that there are two kinds of knowledge that staff need to have in order to improve their practice. The first one is basic knowledge. That comes from experimental research. And when we hear about research-based interventions and stuff like that, we're often asked to make sure that our interventions are research-based. But when we hear about that, we're talking really specifically about research. Profound knowledge is also defined in the improvement science area, and it includes the organizational and specific knowledge about how things work in a particular setting. And then you can see the reference here from the improvement science if you're interested in looking at that further. As in advocacy and program improvement, we can advocate for AT services and resources at all opportunities. And we've talked about how administrators are at a table that we don't get to sit at. So it's important for us to tell them what to look for. If we're doing program improvement, one of the things we might do is develop and implement a long-range plan. And also, always, we hope we're conducting ongoing evaluation of the services we provide, not just the professional development services, but all of the services that we provide in terms of student-facing services and things like that. We hope to integrate AT into strategic plans and other improvement areas. So if we can, we want to be involved with the planning of the district level strategic plan. And we can ask to be at that table. And hardly anybody ever says, no, we don't want you to come to the meeting. And then we can contribute both to the things that they are talking about, but also contribute some new information about the work that we do. Administrators can do things as supervisors and as developing program improvement activities. They can create a committee, complete a self-assessment where we ask everybody in the district to do some kind of self-assessment, whether it be the skills that they have or the way that things work in the district to provide the services that you're providing. We need to design a system to regularly evaluate AT services and then review strategic plans, technology plans, and other improvement plans, looking for opportunities to align our efforts with the efforts of the district. So I want to invite you again to think about the program improvement activities that you may want to complete. This is the fourth part of this worksheet. And particularly as you on a regular basis, what do you do to evaluate the services you provide? And how can you use that information to inform what you do in the future? I think this is a great time to be doing some of that kind of work, to develop a planning committee if you're going to do that. And hopefully this worksheet will get you going. So I have one final question for you, which is, what one thing will you do differently as a result of hearing this information today? Did you come up with something that you had in mind as a result of the conversations that we've had today? I see there are some new. Okay, so Deborah says maybe include some information in district orientation. 5-minute tech tips in a newsletter can be bite-sized and digestible. Make it engaging and memorable. Absolutely.
I was really playing off of Tara's comment about providing training and then and then going back to the slide you had last week of all the ways that you could do that.
Right. I think
different
one of the
social
things
media.
we tend to do is to think we can't do professional learning unless we do a workshop, and the administrators won't give us an hour to do that. And so my challenge to everyone is, what else could you do? And I love your list here, Deb. Thank you.
And then the
So
other
the
one that last time that we talked about was giving people credit. I'm making sure that they somehow had some, that we provide contact hour credit, but just making sure that there are incentives beyond just the gaining of knowledge itself. We talked about micro credentialing, those kind of things, but just providing lots of different ways for people to get and demonstrate.
Okay, so Michelle says review our building capacity plans and update our working spreadsheet, as well as including a date for all tasks. Without a date, it's only a wish list. Heard that once. So absolutely. And thank you for that. When you talk about building capacity plans, are they for the services that you provide, or do buildings have capacity plans in general? For AT. Okay, thank you. So the others of you who are on this call, what else would you do as a result of thinking about and hearing this information? Doesn't have to be AT, and we focused a lot on AT because it's an OTAP activity, but we're really glad to have you all here.
Well, Gail, I kind of like the idea of going back and solidifying your vision statement. I think a lot of times people, just it needs to be a driving force that brings you back to what your purpose is, I think. So sometimes just reevaluating, just seeing if it needs tweaking.
Okay. Tara says, I'll continue asking to be at meetings where administrators are planning and preparing for the year. I can gain more information on needs and provide more information on accessing AT. You may, if you're not allowed into those meetings, which is not uncommon, you may want to give your direct supervisor a list of things that you're hoping for, and that they can look for as they do that planning. Michelle says, oh, that's a good one. Okay, well, we have, by my clock, we have 1 minute left. I think being at the table where the conversations are is important. Sharing points with someone who is. So, yeah, so we may not be invited to that table, but we can certainly make sure that the people who supervise us know what they should bring to that table. And we can do that in ways that make sense to them and are meaningful. know that this is a baby steps process. I gave you a worksheet that talks about every aspect of making an administrator your ally and every aspect of what school administrators do. It's a baby step. So extraordinary results come from taking ordinary steps every day in the right direction. I hope that you get to do that. If you'd like to talk with me about this topic more, or if you're looking for additional resources about developing an assistive technology program, or if you need a bunch of forms or stuff, these are two resources that you can use to get to that information. I've enjoyed being with you today. Thank you so much. And you see my contact information here. I'm very glad to talk with you anytime.